Hello, welcome to Picture Me Coding. My name is Erik Aker. My co-host Mike Moll's with me today. Hi, Mike. How you doing?
Hey there. I'm doing pretty well.
Mike, this is episode 20 for us. I don't know if I ever thought we'd make it to 20. We started doing this for fun. Are you surprised? We made it all the way to 20.
A little bit. What's that statistic that you told me about? 97% of podcasts don't make it this far or something like that.
It's 21. 99% of podcasts stop on or before episode 21.
Oh, wow.
90% stop after episode 7 or 10, I think, maybe 7. So we're pretty stubborn, I guess. Well, we're going to close our season with our 20th episode here. The reason we're going to do that is we're going to take a break for 2 weeks and then we'll be back in January. So we're going to take a break for the winter holiday, for New Year's. This episode, accordingly, will have a whole bunch of cliffhangers in it. I hope you have cliffhanger. I didn't bring any cliffhangers. I hope you brought some cliffhangers.
No.
Well, we're supposed to. I don't know. We got to get people interested in waiting for 2 weeks, I guess. But in the meantime, we do now have an email address. So if you are listening to this show and you want to reach out to us, send us questions or insults or complaints. Well, actually, I'm a little too fragile for the latter. Mike can probably handle it, but maybe if you just are enjoying the show and want to send us a note, or you have questions or things we'd like to talk about on the show, please send us an email. Email address is podcast@picturemecoding.com. And I'll put that in the notes for the show here as well. You can also, if you're enjoying the show, you can rate and review the show in the podcasting apps you are using to listen to it. And that will probably increase our listener audience from 60 people per episode all the way up to maybe 62.
Oh, come on. I think I'd probably at least go to 65.
65 is really a stretch for us, but maybe we'll get there someday. A very small, dedicated group of people out there hanging out with us every week. So, Mike, at the end of the year now, 2023, I wanted to ask, we've been talking about music and then we've been talking about software. These are our cross-cutting interests, of course. They go right together. Did you have anything you loved this year that you think you will carry with you into future years that you are so happy you encountered music-wise?
Yeah, there was some pretty good stuff this year. It's been quite a bit of variety too. Some really good albums, some really good songs. There's this one song that I keep coming back to. It's called "The End of a Gun" by this band called Ghost Woman. I think you remember it. I think we added it to our shared playlist at one point in time. It's a pretty straight guitar rock song. Sounds a little retro, but just really catchy and such ear candy that I kept coming back and listening to it over and over throughout the year. But yeah, there have been lots of good albums this year, lots of good songs. I really like the Caroline Polachek album that came out earlier in the year. Lana Del Rey put out a pretty good album.
Oh,
Uh,
I didn't hear that. I've never listened to her.
yeah, this is the first album I've listened to deeply. Lots of good California stuff on there. So
Hmm.
good candidates for my California playlist. Really great album by this band called Wednesday, and a wonderful song on there called "Chosen to Deserve." There, there was a really fun song from the artist Hardy. I think we talked about him a little bit. He's
He's like a
this
pop country guy.
he does this unique blend of country and I guess what you would call new metal. So
That sounds horrible.
you would think, but he did this song called "Truck Bed" that I just really enjoy. Um, the chorus line is something like, "I woke up on the wrong side of the truck bed with a bone dry bottle of Jack." Fun year for music. Yeah,
I
everything. Go ahead.
I listened to that song. You recommended it. I could not take it seriously enough to keep listening to it. I had to turn it off.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's not meant to be taken seriously, but
It just felt too. I had to turn it off. I actually, at the beginning of the year, I listened to Pine Grove a lot. They had an album come out last year. Really liked it. Listen to the Brad Meldau Beatles
Oh yeah,
album.
that was really good too.
Yeah, I liked that quite a lot. I think the best song I heard this year was Bummer Year by Good Looks. I loved that song. And another song I loved this year was Aesop Rock's Mindful Solutionism on his album too. It was a good year. I agree with you. Good year for music.
Also very good songs.
We made, listeners, we made a shared playlist. If you want to listen along to some of the stuff we've been talking about, we have a shared playlist. It's on Spotify. We'll put a link to it in the show notes. And if you can listen to every song without skipping anything, you will win an award. What is that award, Mike? I don't think I can listen to every song on there without skipping. I
Um,
don't. So my bet is that there is not a human on the planet who would listen to every song on there without skipping anything, with the exception of my co-host Mike Mall.
there is no money involved in this award, so I don't think there will be that incentive. So it's not like, spending a night in a haunted house or something like that. But um, if you do listen to it and you don't skip anything and you actually enjoy all of the songs, please let us know because we will definitely mention you and and praise your good taste.
That their prize probably, if we put all the people who listen to that playlist and don't skip anything in a room, I'm betting there's 3 in the world. Probably it's a very small group of people. So this week you pitched a topic to me that I thought was cool. You said something bad will eventually happen. What did you mean by that?
So we've been talking a lot recently about distributed systems, and there's these properties of safety and liveness. Liveness, in particular, always the definition of it always kind of amuses me. People usually say something along the lines of "something good will eventually happen," which is cool, but also kind of optimistic. And so our counter to that is that inevitably something bad will also happen. And
That's like a property of software in general. Something bad will
right.
eventually happen.
So, and we're human. We've been doing this for a long time. So naturally, we have encountered some bad things, often things that we have to take responsibility for. And
So this is an opportunity for me to talk about my embarrassing things over the years, things I did that were bad or
right,
said that
I,
were bad
I
or
guess we can think of this as being like, a pre resolution confession of our sins. So,
when you said something bad will eventually happen, I was reminded of Charlie Brown, who said, famous computer scientist Charlie Brown, penned by Schultz, of course. I think I'm afraid of being happy because whenever I get too happy, something bad always happens. Charlie Brown, the software developer. So I called it the Charlie Brown property of software.
I like that. It's very philosophical.
The first thing I would think of that comes to mind for me is let's see, how do I start this story? So years ago, I used to work on a consumer website and I had to build user registration features. So user registers, you have you put in your username and you have a password, all this kind of stuff, authentication, forgot password, all these flows that we're used to on the internet over the last 20 years. And so I was building all these endpoints for a back end and somebody was building a front end. I wanted to make sure it worked. And we had something to do with email. I can't remember the details, but we were using emails as usernames, which was common at the time, common now. And we were filtering or parsing. What were we doing? We were rejecting certain emails, I think. Probably swear words, things like that. I don't remember why. So I wanted to write unit tests for this. And I thought, wow, I want to write unit tests, but I don't want to just write some boring unit tests where I've got some static values. I want to randomly generate email addresses and see if my code breaks. I want to see if my code works on this randomly generated values. This was in Python. As before there's a library in Python now called Hypothesis, which is pretty good at randomly generating inputs for tests. Anyway, so I wrote this unit test, and it randomly generated email addresses, and it ran through my system. And about an hour later, the person who was a product owner on that work, he came to me and said, "Hey, did we send out a bunch of emails?" And my immediate response was, "No, I didn't send out any emails. I've just been running tests." And he was like, "Oh, okay." Because someone said that there were some emails that were bouncing, that were coming back. And I said, "Oh, that sounds weird, but it's not related to my work."
Famous last words.
Yeah. So then we were using a third party. I went to the third party for our, we were sending email via the third party's API. And I looked at the send statistics to kind of see what he was talking about. And I noticed all of these garbage emails in there. So in my unit tests, they were actually sending out, you forgot your password and your password's been reset. They were sending out all these emails to real addresses that I had randomly generated, which is pretty embarrassing. And the bounce rate was pretty legit. There were like obviously a lot of bounces, but there were some that made it through. So there's some random emails that got delivered. I was pretty embarrassed about that.
Did you get any responses?
Never got a response. I think it was, I think I generated for each run of my test, I was generating 1,000 email addresses at a time. Anyway, fortunately, we didn't get blocked. Our domain did not get blocked for spamming, and we survived that one. Okay, I found it really embarrassing, and I went back to my unit test suite, and I made sure that it was definitely not allowed to talk to services like that anywhere in the unit test suite. I thought that was embarrassing, though. Maybe now that I've confessed my sin, I can let it go. What do you think?
I think so. Though you should probably, resolve to not do that again. So
I have been pretty militant in every test suite I've ever written after that to not let my services talk to things inside a test suite. Databases are okay, in my opinion, but no third-party APIs, nothing like that. Block that stuff off. I guess I don't have a lot of like I broke everything stories. Do you have any of those?
I have a pretty good one from not too long ago. The company that I was working for, I was the CTO, and this was just after the pandemic had started, and we had largely vacated the office. So we had talked about changing our domain name registrar for a long time. And my thought was that the office is empty. We're not doing a lot of business at the moment because, a lot of our customers are having economic issues as well. So this would be the ideal time to switch our domain name registrar. And, there's sort of implied in there the idea that I kind of suspected that this might not go 100% smoothly, which is why we had waited until a point where we thought it was of lower risk.
Mm-hmm. DNS, you change DNS and then there's caching that happens at all the servers all over the world potentially, right? So you don't know when somebody's going to get the updated DNS record.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what we were thinking the sorts of issues would be. We were doing this because we were on a name registrar that was pretty cheesy.
They were horrible. Do you want to name them? I know the
I'm
story.
I'm reluctant to name them, but
Okay, we don't want to name and shame them. They actively tried to prevent people from leaving their services, and they do not offer a lot of DNS features.
yeah, suffice it to say they were pretty terrible. Yeah,
They were just like a
right.
scammy service, really.
So I went through the official process on their site, according to their instructions, to do the domain name switch or the domain name transfer. And I should probably mention that, this is not something I had any experience with. My thought at the time was I am the CTO, and this is a fairly high level technology thing to do, and I should know how to do this. So I'm gonna do it myself and understand this for the future.
I
Um,
want to warn people. I think there might be some swearing in this story.
right. So, as Lyle Lovett would say, that was my first mistake. Um, so anyway, went through the process. We got a message back from the old registrar saying your domain name transfer has been accomplished, and we thought, okay, excellent. I guess the punchline, which nobody is going to be surprised by at this point in time, is that our DNS actually stopped working more or less entirely.
But what do you remember why?
Well, I think we had assumed that doing the domain name transfer would also transfer our DNS records to the name servers for the new registrar, which, maybe is a thing that legitimate registrars do, but
Not the ones
this
who want to prevent you from leaving.
yeah, not the ones who are not that enthusiastic about letting you leave. So anyway,
So we got new name servers, no DNS records, all gone.
got got new name servers. They didn't have any DNS records, including fairly critical stuff like the A records. And since I was new to this process and also not terribly bright, I did not make a record of our existing DNS setup. So, anyway, for the next few hours, we started manually adding the DNS records into the new name servers. It took somewhere between 3 and 4 hours to get everything in correctly, get all the C names and text records that we needed and so forth, and the MX records for the mail servers and stuff like that. And I think we did eventually get things back to semi normal after about 3 or 4 hours.
Didn't we have a zone? Didn't I have a? I was there with you doing this too.
Yes.
We had a zone file somehow. I
We
don't.
had an older zone file. I don't recall
Zone file is
how
like a
we,
DNS records backup thing.
right. And so we had this available to us. And so we didn't have to completely, remember everything from scratch, fortunately. But yeah, it took a while to get everything back to normal. I think we had a couple of issues that did persist into the next day. In any case, our company's website was offline for a few hours. A lot of the email that comes in from our partners was unavailable for a few hours. Probably the only thing that saved me from getting chastised and or fired was the fact that we weren't doing a lot of business anyway. So
It sounds like a pretty royal screw up. I remember this. I didn't remember when it happened. I didn't remember that it was after COVID. Here's the thing I remember about this story. You told me something I will never forget. After we discovered it was broken, you said to me, well, fucking up your company's DNS is a rite of passage.
yeah, I still think that's probably true. I think if you haven't messed up DNS for your organization, you probably have never attempted to do anything with DNS for your organization. But I may be wrong about that. I'm sure there are people who are more careful and knowledgeable who've done it successfully.
Man, you tell him that story though, and I almost start sweating imagining that happening right now. That would be terrible.
Yeah. The other thing I remember during the middle of this, we were going back and forth trying to fix things, and I made the joke about how it's just naming things in cache invalidation. How hard could that be? So,
Famous joke, famous meme joke. So I guess are we talking about things that we did that were embarrassing or things that were broken or what's the theme here, do you think?
I think things that were embarrassing is probably a broad enough theme. I think, the things that are more impactful or more memorable are probably the best. I mean, everybody out there has, dropped a table or broken a build or something like that. But those cases where, you draw attention to yourself are probably the best ones.
I don't think I've ever dropped a table. Well, this is part of that aspect where the things that you carry with you are things nobody else would remember. Years ago, you and I were in a stand up You would probably never remember this. Nobody there would remember it. This is many years ago. And we were talking about stuffing objects in S3. And they were JSON. So we were like serializing JSON. And we were just using this term JSON blobs. And I remember someone there who was more in leadership side said, "What does blob stand for? Does it stand for anything?" And I just said, "No, it's like a blob of data." I just spoke up and answered. And you said, "Well, actually, it stands for binary large object." And I was like, "Oh, shit. I guess I should make sure I know what I'm talking about before I start speaking." That was embarrassing. So
And
that was a good lesson for me.
to be fair, I think that might have been, I guess retronym is not the right word, but I think when people did start using the word blob, they did mean it like, just like the creature from the movie.
Mm.
And then the idea of that it stood for uh, binary large object was kind of a ex post facto thing, but that's what I knew it as at the time.
The term for that is a backronym.
Acronym? Ah,
Yeah, you go backwards with your acronym. It's an anachronistic acronym.
I like that.
Years ago, in my first job where I worked full time as an engineer, I had done software development, website building before that, off and on, done it in companies. I had done Linux stuff, but I got a job working full time as a web developer, and I was working for a radio station, and I had to manage their radio on the internet. So you'd go to the website for the radio station and you'd click play and you could listen to the live radio. And the live radio was from a feed that we sent off to this CDN company, and the CDN served it and made it available to our listeners. And we used to get these complaints, and there's this telltale sign here. We used to get these complaints that the feed didn't work. It just wouldn't load. People would click play and it would just not work. And the telltale sign is that those people who complained, they always worked for the same company I worked for. So they were in the building I was in, and they'd be like, "I click on it, it doesn't work." And it was like, "Oh no, people can't hear the radio. It works for me. Why doesn't it work for you?" And so I got in touch with that CDN, small company. They were pretty cool, actually. I think they're even still around. And I said, "Hey, we've got some users it doesn't work for. They're on Windows. I'm on OS X. I can't figure it out." And they said, "Well, you need to go to your IT department and talk to them and figure out why it's not working." So I went to the IT department and I said, "Hey, is there anything on these computers that would prevent them from listening to this radio stream? On the website, you're downloading it from the CDN, so it's across the open internet." And the IT department guy said there was one. He said no. He configured those machines. He knew that they were fine. There's nothing wrong with them. All right. So I went back to the CDN company and I said, the IT department says it's not us. It's got to be on you guys. And he said, "Nope." This was like the person who ran that company was writing back to me at this point. He was like, "No, I'm pretty sure it's on your side." I was like, "All right." So I found some client that they had published, open source client that was written in C. And I didn't really know C. And I had read K and R, really. That's how much C I knew. I'd read K and R.
Yeah.
And I tried to piece through the C client to figure out what was happening. And then I started sending emails back to them like, "It looks like your client on line 56 of this file is doing this thing. Maybe that caused the problem." And I probably sent half a dozen of these emails over the course of a week. And finally, the guy who ran that company said, "Can you send me one of these computers that cannot connect?" And so we shipped him one.
Wow.
And he wrote me back a week later, and he wrote, "Yeah, you've got a firewall rule, which is blocking it. It's on the computer." I was like, this is another thing that I've carried with me. This is the first job full-time working as a web developer. I spent a week trying to read and understand their C and critique it. And I had no business doing that. I was completely, wildly off base. And I think what I took away from that was, wow, before I bother somebody else, I should be absolutely sure the problem's not on our side. Like 99.9% sure the problem's not on our side. And it has made me extremely tentative about saying, the problem's on your side, my friend.
That's some really impressive customer service, though. I kind of admire that.
That guy didn't even make me feel bad for being an idiot. And I deserved it. I really deserved it. I still carry this one with me all these years on my shoulders. Like, I wasted so much of their time and I was really going in the wrong direction and pretty cluelessly poking around in their code that had absolutely nothing to do with our problems. It's pretty embarrassing.
It's a good one. I like that story.
I don't know if I have any others that are my own things that I'm embarrassed by that I did. Do you have any others?
I do. This was not a hugely impactful thing, but it was definitely embarrassing. It's about 15 years ago at a startup that I had just started working for, and it was the first job that I had done where we used Django. Django was relatively new at that point in time. I can't remember what version they were on, but I was trying to do some QA stuff, and they had this testing framework in Django. And one of the things that it would do for you is you could test against a real database. Most people use SQLite, but you could set it up to talk to MySQL or Postgres or whatever. And they had this thing where it would create the test database, populate, build the tables from the metadata of the Django objects, then run the test, then tear down the database. So I was playing around with this, and I was trying to set it up with I think we were using MySQL at the time. I was trying to set it up with a real MySQL test database. And I ran it. Everything seemed to work, but immediately thereafter, the couple of programmers who were sitting near me, this was like an open desks type of thing where we were in a tiny office. They were starting to go, what the hell's going on? Um,
What
you
the
know,
hell was going on?
so they're, they were building stuff and working against a dev database, and all of a sudden the stuff they were working on, stopped working. And so I realized that what I had done was basically drop the entire dev database in the process of trying to get these tests to work. It was embarrassing in and of itself, but it was doubly embarrassing due to the fact that I was twice as old as basically everybody else in the room. So
Was that like your first week in that job?
probably literally my first week in that job. Yeah.
I think in your case, I would have been like, it couldn't have been me. Look how old I am. I have a lot of
Yeah.
experience.
I might have tried that ploy. I'm not sure, but no, I did have to fess up to it. But and it was more or less recoverable, but I guess a good object lesson in being careful about things. Even if you do think you understand them, you should definitely be careful about things that drop databases.
I have a database one. This happened to me yesterday. I was looking at some very slow running queries in one of our applications. And I thought, this looks like it would benefit from an index or two. And this is a table in PostgreSQL. It's got 20 million rows in it in production, and there's probably 500,000 rows in dev. So, you know what? I'm going to add these indexes in dev, see how it does. So I did that, and it worked great. Looked great for a day, ran a bunch of tests through it, looked pretty solid. So then I rolled them out to our staging server. Staging server doesn't have many records, but they work fine there. It's not a great test in this case. Finally, I put them in production, and everything was great. And I was looking at the times that it was taking to run these queries. The response times were reduced. I could see in my tracing that the queries were actually taking a lot less time to run. And then 4 hours later, everything stopped, and then nothing would run. So I look at the PostgreSQL database, and there's a whole lot of queries that are just blocked. And this just happened yesterday, and last night I was cleaning it up. So I actually don't know what I broke. I don't find it that embarrassing in this case. Should I be embarrassed at this one? So I rolled back my indexes, and everything's working fine again. What actually did I do in that case? I broke prod, but this is a service that it doesn't see many requests throughout the day, maybe a few hundred requests throughout the day. And they were, it runs these reports, and there were half a dozen reports. Actually, there were about 20. There were about 20 reports that were blocked all afternoon yesterday. And I thought I was doing something beneficial, and I blew it. I don't think I'm going to be embarrassed by this one. Do you think I should be embarrassed by this one?
I don't think you should be embarrassed by it. I don't entirely understand it yet. Um, it seemed to
Maybe
me,
that's why I'm not embarrassed. Once I understand it, I'll be like, oh, I should have known that.
it seems to be a situation where these queries were waiting for a lock to be released, but while they were waiting, they were somehow sucking up CPU, which is a little bit interesting to me. But yeah, I wouldn't be embarrassed by it.
Just the cost of doing business.
Just a thing that happens.
It's just a thing that happened. PostgreSQL just reindexes stuff. It just does vacuum full. And you know what? You're just going to wait. Go get some lunch while we run the vacuum. Okay.
You know better now.
I'm just going to run the vacuum through here while you're working. Okay. Just pay no mind to me. That's PostgreSQL.
That's a good one.
What else you got for me? You got any others?
This is a story from very early in my career, and it's not a technical thing per se, but it was pretty embarrassing at the time. So my very first job out of college, I worked at one of the national supercomputer centers. And a part of my role was that every couple times a week, I would have to sit on what was essentially like our customer service line. So people who were using the supercomputers to do scientific research would call in and they would say they were having problems and we would try to help them through them or at least get enough information to take down and get them in touch with somebody who could help them, that kind of thing. So it was standard customer service. It's just that the customers were tended to be pretty intelligent and sophisticated people.
They're supercomputer users.
Yeah, supercomputer users generally either professors or graduate students. So So one day I got a call from somebody who was having trouble logging into their account on the supercomputer. And even though he, was a native English speaker, I was having a real hard time figuring out what he was saying and what he was asking of me. And um, I went through a few things to try to help him for about 10 or 15 minutes and just couldn't figure out how to get him back into the supercomputer. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, this guy is wasting my time. He's probably wasting time on the supercomputer. He shouldn't have gotten a grant in the first place. I don't, maybe,
The guy just sounds
yeah,
totally clueless.
yeah.
He can't
Maybe
even get in.
can't even get into his account. Maybe he's, maybe he's a grad student or something and just doesn't have any experience in this area or whatever. So anyway, I got to the point where I was too frustrated with him, and I said, "Look, I don't know how to help you. I'm going to have to talk to some other people and we'll get back to you and we'll try to figure this out." And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I'm not going to call this guy back. I'm just going to wait for him to call somebody else and bother them because I figured he wasn't probably missing out on anything anyway. A little while later, I was sitting around in this common area that we had, in the supercomputer center on my floor. It was kind of like a little library coffee area. And I mentioned this guy, who had called and really frustrated me, and I was just basically planning to blow him off. And somebody said, "Oh, do you remember his name?" And I said, "Yeah, he was, Doctor So and So or whatever." Uh, and they kind of paused for a second. They looked at me and they said, "That guy just won the Nobel Prize, right?"
Did you say, obviously, it was not the Nobel Prize in logging into his terminal?
No, I wish I would have thought of that rejoinder at the time, but I think I was just like, "Oh, well, maybe I should call him back then." Um, to be fair, it was like the Nobel Prize in medicine or something, so he wasn't He wasn't
Oh,
a
one of the easy ones.
yeah,
I
one of the
got it.
easy ones. He wasn't a physicist or anything like that.
Okay.
So
The Nobel Prize in Linux administration.
yeah, so I guess the moral of that story being, don't make any assumptions about your users.
Yeah. I mean, my moral is don't just answer questions when people ask them, especially if I'm standing next to you. Just think about it for a minute. Do I really know the answer? It's okay to say I don't know. That was what I learned 10 plus years ago. And I've carried that with me. And I've also learned don't assume the problem's on somebody else's side. I've carried that with me too. That was embarrassing. And I've learned that sometimes you do have to mess up DNS.
I think that probably, I think what we're trying to accomplish here is, not just telling funny, embarrassing stories, but trying to convey to people that if you do this job, you're going to mess things up. Sometimes, even when you're very experienced and knowledgeable, you're going to mess things up. And, I think it's good for people who are starting out in the business to know that it's not the end of the world. I mean, we've heard some horror stories over the years of, people who did do things that got them fired, put the decimal point in the wrong place and transferred $1 trillion instead of $1 million or whatever, that kind of thing, or the things where you literally knock a business out of operation for days on end. That, you know, those things are pretty rare, but everybody does make mistakes that break mission critical things from time to time.
Something bad will eventually happen, you said. I just really was hoping to unburden myself with these embarrassing things that have been in my head for the last 12 plus years.
Yeah, I guess, going back to the Charlie Brown analogy, I don't know if how many people out there actually know who Charlie Brown is anymore, but Charlie Brown kind of famously never got he was tricked by Lucy over and over and over again, and he never quite reached the point where he stopped trusting her. Um,
So Lucy is like our software in this analogy,
yeah, Lucy is like software in general, or your IT infrastructure in general. It's
or the cloud. Lucy is the cloud.
yeah. I guess there's this famous adage about how programmers always think they fixed the last bug, but just keep in mind that eventually Lucy's gonna pull the football away again, and you're going to fall on your butt. So
Well, I think when we come back next season, we're going to do a show just about bugs that we found. We get to be the heroes of those stories, I think. That's our cliffhanger.
correct.
Bugs.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. This has been Picture Me Coding, season 1. Thanks so much to my co-host, Mike Mull. Mike, I had a lot of fun recording these with you. I learned some stuff,
Same.
and it was a good time.
We will see you next year.
Yeah. Happy New Year. We'll see you in 2024. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.